Hello, welcome. Glad you all can make it, given the weather. I'm sure it was difficult. My name is Donna Perkins. I'm one of the faculty that is organizing the Sidore Lecture Series for the 2019-2020 academic year, along with my colleague Kate Gaudette and Alex Holzenkemper and Catherine Peebles. So welcome. Let me tell you a little bit about the Sidore Lecture Series before we begin. It was established in 1965 with the idea of bringing a variety of speakers to UNH to talk about perhaps some controversial and critical issues around everything from science and politics and society and culture. And it was named after the humanitarian and businessman Saul O. Sidore from Manchester, New Hampshire, who really felt that he needed to provide security for his employees, and he had very strong ethical principles in his business practices. And so the Sidore Family Foundation funds this annually, and it has become the preeminent lecture series at UNH, the Center for Humanities, and so we want to thank them for this. And as you can see, no, I guess we don't have that one up there. But before I get going, I want to remind you guys that we have our final event in the series is scheduled for April 7th, and it's called Returning Citizens, so it's sort of come full circle. And it's Returning Citizens, Reentry and Reintegration of the Formerly Incarcerated People. And so if you're interested, we'd love to have you. Hope you can attend. And tonight's panel is going to focus on efforts to block many roads to prison. A potential benefit of exploring that question, our whole series was entitled, What is a Criminal? The potential benefits of exploring what is a criminal is that it becomes clear which people are most likely to gain that title. And although diversion programs receive perhaps less attention and support than incarceration, they provide some light in terms of who becomes a criminal and what it takes to prevent that outcome. And so I'd like to introduce our panel. And we first have Chief John Drury of the Farmington Police Department. And Chief Drury, in collaboration with the Dover Police Department, is overseeing a 2-year pilot program called the LEAD program, which stands for Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. And they encourage alternatives to arrest for offenders, especially for crimes that result from substance misuse. And rather than jailing them, police officers may refer them for recovery programs or perhaps find them some housing. And then next we have the Honorable Tina Nadeau. She is the Chief Justice of the New Hampshire Superior Court. In 2006, Justice Nadeau spearheaded an effort to open a drug court docket in Rockingham County Superior Court and presided as the drug court judge there for 4 years. Once she became Chief Justice, she secured federal funding for drug courts, and 2 additional counties added drug courts. And then under her leadership, a total of 10 drug courts are now up and running in the state of New Hampshire. And in 2016, she worked with legislators to pass legislation for statewide funding for drug courts in New Hampshire. And part of that legislation, she hired a statewide coordinator and is working with all the counties to ensure that they comply with the national standards of adult drug courts. As Chief Justice, she continues to cover other drug court judges at least once a month. And then over here we have Carrie Conway. She began working for Stratford County in 2002, and she's currently the Criminal Justice Program Coordinator, overseeing drug court, mental health court, habitual offender academy, transitional housing, and she oversees grants for such programs as Supervised Visitation Center, Family Justice Center, and she collaborates with the Coast Bus to assist the county in transportation efforts. She graduated from Plymouth State College in 1997 with a bachelor's degree in social work, and then again in 1999 from the University of New England with her social work master's degree. And she's also a certified correctional officer and a certified public manager. And so help me welcome our distinguished panel. And now I will turn it over to Kate Gaudette, who will act as moderator for the panel.
Thanks, Donna. So we're going to start off with each of our panelists giving a short talk about what they've been doing to divert people from the prison system here in New Hampshire. And I think we can start with Chief Drury down at the end.
Thank you. 20 years ago is when I started my career in law enforcement, and it was a lot different then. We locked people up, and we wouldn't see them for a while. And in working in a small town, they come back. So in some cases, yes, you have to. And in some cases, a pair of handcuffs is what you have to do. But they're, in working in the past decade, and especially the last 2 or 3 years, trying to find alternatives to give people a better chance. A lot of it is mental health, a lot of it is addiction, and in trying to work with people so that I don't see them on the floor for the third time. And when I do see them on the floor for the first time, and I've just Narcaned them to get them back to life, they look up and they go, it was a funny story where one of our EMTs just said, "You were just Narcaned by the chief of police." And in doing that, and in looking around and seeing the conditions that the gentleman was living in, it struck a chord with me that we've got to try and get these people back into society. And if, everybody is somebody's child. And in trying to do that and work with these people to make them valuable members of society once again, where they were, and the twinkle in their eye when they were in second grade, and just trying to remember back. And, we have to take the time to try and do that. So in working with the LEAD program and drug court and all of the other programs out there, sometimes we have to give somebody a second chance or a third chance or sometimes a 10th chance. And you don't know when that epiphany is going to happen, and it may be at 2 o'clock in the morning. And in training our officers, both in Farmington and in Dover, so that when that happens, they have somebody to turn to try and get them some help. And in doing so, the window is so small sometimes, especially with heroin. It affects people, and it basically rewires your brain. And if you can get them the help when they cry out as soon as you can, it really makes a big difference. And in trying not to give somebody a criminal record that may dog them for the rest of their lives or make it difficult for them. Now, sometimes you have to. And in the LEAD program, there are certain stipulations that we'll probably get into a little bit later that they have to meet to be able to be accepted into the program that satisfy a lot of requirements, so that not only are the victims of the crime are satisfied, but the person that we may arrest is satisfied, and that we can get them the help that they need in a timely manner. And that's one of the things that was tough a couple of years ago was getting them a bed, immediately, because that window is so small, and sometimes they're looking at you and wanting the help, and all of a sudden that high will wear off, and now they're looking for the next high instead of looking for the help. So we really had to do a lot of outside-of-the-box thinking to try and make things work, and not every case is the same. But that's kind of what started us in both Farmington and in Dover to try and get some different ideas to keep people from ending up in the jails.
Would you mind explaining what the LEAD program is?
Sure.
And just how it works in practice?
LEAD is law enforcement assisted diversion. So we can do a walk-in with somebody who just wants some help. And we will call a recovery associate that we have with us, and we'll get them phone conversations going, and ultimately to try and get them to meet with that recovery coach immediately. When we have to make an arrest, and these are minor offenses, such as trespassing, where someone has been sleeping in an apartment building, they don't have any place to go, a drug addiction problem, where we found a little bit of some kind of illicit substance on them. Minor things like that, but also drug-related things that we can work with them. And if there's a victim of the crime, that victim has to be on board with diverting the person. If they are on board and the person wants to be diverted, we will hold the arrest in abeyance for a little while to give them an opportunity to get into a program. And we bring them into our booking room. We immediately call for the recovery coach, usually SOS Recovery. They will come to our PD, meet with the people, and try and get them into a program immediately. So in trying to speed up the process. Once they're accepted into the program, that charge goes away. It's not filed. And so, there may be we've been very fortunate in our program. We haven't had anybody come back that hasn't at least been involved with the program. And so once that charge goes away, it's like everything is forgiven, and we wish them the best through a lot of laws where sometimes we don't find out what happened to them. I can tell you one gentleman came up to me and he had been accepted and showed me his first paycheck that he got sober. So I do know he had a happy ending. So. But it's a struggle for these people every day, and addiction takes 3 years to get over in many cases, and as far as I understand, and it's very frustrating. The little town of Farmington in 2015 had 12 overdose deaths, population of 8,000. Everybody knows everybody, and everybody knew somebody that had passed away. We did a lot of work. The town actually started a little group called Friends of Farmington, so people could go. They have AA meetings there, and they have Narcan on hand there, so that people can get some immediate help and talk to some friends, and just have a place to feel they belong. To try and get them, like I say, get them the help that they need, and as soon as we can. So.
Thank you. Justice Nadeau, you have some slides, I think?
Sure, I'll start explaining, I'll explain drug court and I'll end with that.
Okay.
So great, thank you. Hi, everyone, it's great to be here. And one of the things I like to say is that if jails and prisons changed behavior, they would be empty. And they're not empty. And does anyone know what the likelihood of someone reoffending is who comes out of jail or prison? What level they might reoffend? It's 70%. So that is a terrible return on our investment. We're sending folks to prison and jail, and they come out and they reoffend at a rate of 70%. So we're not protecting society, we're not reducing crime, and we're probably making people who go to jail or prison into worse criminals because they are around people who have the same kind of thinking and the same kind of background, and they don't know anything else. So drug court is a way to take those folks who have serious substance use disorder, very serious, and a serious criminal record. So some people think, drug court, it's great for the first-time offender. It's actually not. Drug court is designed for the person that I see in my court recycle over and over and over and over again. And I'm going to give you an example of a woman that is a classic profile for drug court. Let's talk about Tracy. She's 35 years old with 3 children, all in the care of DCYF. She's been using drugs since the age of 13, when her mother, someone abusing cocaine, provided her with her first hit. And that's not unusual to see people in drug court with parents who have been using around them. She turned to heroin at age 20. She reports daily use of heroin and cocaine. Her mother's an alcoholic and a cocaine addict. Her brother is in prison for possession of heroin. Her father died when she was 6. She tried intensive outpatient treatment for her heroin use 3 times, but failed each time to complete the program. She's overdosed 10 times. She's entered detox repeatedly, but never completed it. She's been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, PTSD, and anxiety, all untreated. Her housing and transportation are unstable. Though she did obtain a GED at age 20, her ability to hold a job is challenging. Her criminal history began when she was 22 years old with minor misdemeanors and drug possessions. She has 56 convictions with 15 periods of incarceration. And as her criminal conduct escalated to include felony forgery, theft, credit card fraud, all committed to support her substance use disorder, so did the criminal justice response. So we have this person in front of us, and she comes to court for the first time, and the prosecutor will say, let's give her a chance. We're going to give her probation, give her a chance to clean up, and order her to go to treatment. So we all know somebody with a substance use disorder that's been in place since they were 13 is going to raise their hand and march off to substance use treatment. They don't. They don't think they have a problem, they don't know any other way to live, and they're not going to acknowledge it by going to treatment. So of course they mess up on probation, and we see them back in the courtroom again, and the state says, well, this time they blew their chance, so we're going to send them to the House of Corrections for a few months, put them back on probation when they get out, and more sternly order them to go to treatment. So they get out of the House of Corrections, they still don't go to treatment, they're back in front of me for the 4th time, and the state says, now we need 12 months at the House of Corrections and probation. And then by the 5th time or 4th time, I don't know where I am now, the state says to me, they still haven't learned their lesson, they're still committing crime while they're using, now it's time for the state prison. And that's when I said to them, what about this pattern has been working? What about jail has changed this person's behavior? So drug court is designed to target somebody who's got a criminal record, who has used criminal thinking their whole lives, who has been using since their parents gave them their first hit, to have a chance at actually recovering. So if we treat the underlying causes of the substance of the crime, then we are going to be better at reducing the crime itself. We have, in the United States, the highest incarceration rate of any other country on the planet. It is 5 times the worldwide average. Russia is a distant second, a very distant second. So that tells you something about what are we doing and why are we doing it and why do we keep doing it. So we have folks in drug court, and basically what they do, instead of like sort of the traditional model is you have sort of scorched earth advocacy, and you have someone in front of you who's committed a theft to support their habit, and the state wants state prison time, and the defense wants them to be out on a suspended sentence, and the judge does something in between. In drug court, we have a team that works together. We all go to training because it really takes a shift in your thinking. So it's the same judge, the same prosecutor, the same defense attorney, the same probation officer, the same treatment provider, the same case manager, and the same recovery support person. So we all sit around a table, and I can tell you, I never thought I'd be sitting at a table with a treatment provider to decide what to do in the courtroom with an offender that's appearing in front of me. So we all get training together. We all talk about sort of our old ways of thinking and how do we need to readjust them. Probation officers have to think about, how do I motivate someone to change instead of punishing them into changing? Punishment doesn't change behavior. It just level sets the person, and we need to motivate them to change the way they think and the way they act and what they're doing. And so what the offender needs to do is they enter a plea of guilty, and instead of 2 to 4 years at the state prison, they will get 2 to 4 years suspended with 4 years of probation and the obligation to complete the drug court program, which usually takes 18 to 24 months to complete. And in drug court, what they do is they are in intensive outpatient treatment 3 hours a day, 3 days a week. They also are getting individual counseling once a week, maybe twice a week. They are subject to random drug testing at least twice a week, so they don't know. They have an equal chance every day of getting called into drug tests. So under the old system, when someone like this was on regular probation, they would show up at probation every other Wednesday to get a drug test, which is, to me, an IQ test. That is not a drug test, because they simply learn to use around those drug tests. So in drug court, they have to call a phone, and if their color comes up, they have to drop what they're doing and go get a drug test. And so the participants' obligations are intense. Many offenders will say to me, it is so much easier to do a year or two in the state prison than to complete drug court. And a lot of them start off by saying, oh, this is my ticket out of jail. I'm going to scam the system. They'll never know I keep using. I don't care what their motivation is. The studies show that coerced treatment, meaning you have to do this because you're not going to prison, is as effective as voluntary treatment. And so most of them who start off that way, 6, 7, 8 months down the road, they start to realize, oh my gosh, my life is better. I feel better. They don't feel better in the beginning. When they stop using drugs, they feel worse. And so all of us, I'm used to ordering someone to do something, and if they don't do it, they're off to the state prison. But we need to motivate them to change and to want to change. And so we all learn techniques around motivational interviewing. I had a participant once in front of me who, also has trauma. Everybody has a lot of trauma: sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse. 65% of our drug court participants have trauma. It's probably higher than that. 80% of people in our criminal justice system are suffering from substance use disorder and mental health issues. There's definitely 20% who are dangerous. We need to keep them out of society, keep them isolated from us. The rest of them are recycling through the system at a high cost to all of us. And so we need to be able to manage them in the community. So what I tell folks when I'm talking about drug court is, if somebody comes to drug court and they're able to stop using because they're in drug court and I order them to, they don't belong in drug court. Because we are giving the most intense services to the people who have the most intense problem. And if you put the low-hanging fruit in there because you want to feel better, you're actually going to make them worse. So if you put people with low-level needs in a drug court program, you will make them worse. So the people that we put in there are called high-risk, high-need people. High risk doesn't mean dangerous or violent. It means they are high risk for continuing to reoffend, and they are high need because they have severe substance use disorder and or mental health issues, and they have been recycling through the system. So those are the folks that are in drug court. They have to report to probation, they get random home visits, but the probation officer, instead of sort of catching them doing things poorly, goes there to say, hey, I see that your place is clean today. That's great. I can't wait to tell the judge when you show up in drug court next week. Or it's your birthday today and you've got your kids here and I see there's no alcohol here. Excellent. I'm going to give you a raffle ticket for the next time you're in drug court. So the other thing we do is every week, those participants have to show up in drug court. So not only are they going to treatment, case management, probation, drug testing, recovery support services, mental health counseling, they have to come to court every week and sort of account for their behavior. So the idea behind drug court is you combine treatment with the accountability of the court system, and that seems to really work well for this target population. Treatment alone doesn't work for them. Punishment alone doesn't work for them. It's the combination of the two. And so what we do every week is a judge might see 20 of the 70 participants that are in drug court every week, because they're in different phases, and you find out, how did you do this week? Did you produce negative samples? Did you look for a job this week? Were you on time for your treatment? How did you handle that issue that came up with your family this week? And so we as a team decide, should someone get a reward for doing well this week, or do we need to actually give them a sanction for non-compliant behavior? And the participants are used to, I've used drugs, I'm gonna have to go to jail. And we tell them, if you are honest about your use, then we are going to adjust your treatment because you are suffering from substance use disorder. And, the first use or two might be a choice, might be voluntary, But it only takes 1 or 2 hits, especially for heroin, for someone to be severely addicted. And after that, it is a brain disease. And we need to literally help them rewire their brains before they can start thinking logically. You know, when you have diabetes, it's your pancreas that's affected. When you have substance use disorder, it's your brain. And they need their brain to make rational decisions, which they can't do until they've stabilized and become sober for a lengthy period of time. And everybody in drug court wants to stay sober, even though it's really, really hard. I mean, we had one participant, it was actually Stratford County where I was covering, and he had absconded from the drug court program. They abscond, they lie, they are manipulating us, even though they really want to get sober. And when the police went out to act on the warrant, the person was in an overdose state, and in one hand he had heroin, and the other hand he had an application for residential treatment. So if that doesn't tell you what a struggle it is for them. Another woman in drug court, she got into drug court, she had a long history, she lost her kids, she lost her home, she lost everything. And the case that got her into drug court was a possession case, but on that night, she was using with her boyfriend, and he started to overdose, so she called 911. And before the police got there, she took the needle out of his arm and she finished the heroin. So when I heard those things, it makes me realize their brains are literally damaged. And I'm going to show you a slide about that. And it's really difficult to change the way they think. You know, we try to incentivize being honest. You know, we might give them a chip. This week you went to all your treatment, I'm giving you a chip. This week you tested negative, I'm going to give you a chip. If you get 4 chips in a row, you get a gas card or a gift card. And it's amazing to see how much they can't wait to get that chip. This week I did well. Nobody's ever told me that I've done well. And I will have a conversation. I never talked to offenders before, but I'll say to them, tell me some positive quality you think you have in yourself. And 90% of them will say, I don't have enough positive quality. And I'll say, well, you're standing here in front of me today. You decided to enter drug court. That takes courage. You showed up to everything that you were supposed to show up to last week. That takes perseverance. And you can see them sort of like, oh my gosh, nobody, that kind of reward, clapping and applauding. I mean, we call it clapping court. It's very strange, but applauding and positive reinforcement gets them to change behavior. And we learned, we learn about, you need to say 4 positive things for every 1 negative thing that you do in drug court. And I remember trying to teach that. It's different from what we learned. I remember trying to teach that to one of the judges that wasn't a drug court judge, but I was trying to explain drug court to her, and she said, well, what? All right, can I pick 1 positive thing and say the same one 4 times? I said, no, that's not how it works. So imagine, one of the things we have to get them to change is their manipulative behavior, and also the drugs are so strong. I mean, we could do a whole series lecture on substance use disorder and how it changes your brain and how first you use it to get that euphoric feeling. I mean, they talk about multiplying food and sex by 1,000, and that's how you feel when you're taking heroin. And then they keep chasing that high, and then pretty soon their body starts getting used to it. So now the withdrawal that they're feeling and the pain from that is, multiply the worst flu you ever have had by 100, and now they're chasing the drug to stave off the withdrawal and the pain that they feel when they're not using. So we have to get them, and in the process, they do things like, how many of you have heard of a Whizzinator? Has anyone heard of, okay, 1 person. I'm not going to ask you why you know what a Whizzinator is. But basically, it is a product that looks like an actual body part, male body part, that is used to deliver a drug-free sample. And they literally strap it on before they go to probation. And that's how much the drug is driving their behavior, to say, do this thing so you can get this drug. Avoid this test so you can get this drug. And it's stunning. So we have to get out of our old mindset of like, I told you not to do that. Why would you ever do something like that? You're going to jail. Jail, for them, sometimes is a holiday from the stress of their lives, or it's a chance to see old friends they used to be around. It doesn't change their behavior. So we need to reward what we want them to keep doing and help them learn how to change the way they're thinking. So imagine if I told, it's Super Tuesday, so we can talk about this. If I told all the Republicans in the room, in order for you to be healthy, you need to become a Democrat. And if I told all the Democrats in the room, in order for you to be healthy, you need to become a Republican, and you would say, no frigging way. What is she talking about? I mean, that's basically what we're telling folks in drug court, you have to change everything you have ever done in your whole life in order to be healthy. So we have to be more patient than the substance use disorder. And as the chief said, it can take 3, 4, 5 years to get someone to get to that place. So I'm just going to show you this quick. This is my last piece, and then I'm happy to answer questions when we're all done. But so here is just a picture. This is a cocaine, scan of a cocaine user's brain, but it also applies for heroin as well. At the top, you'll see is a normal brain. The middle is a brain of a cocaine user after 10 days of abstinence. The bottom is after 100 days of abstinence. So you can see even after 100 days of abstinence, their brain is still not functioning the way it needs to be. So I'm going to do a little test. Who wants to be a volunteer? Anybody? Oh, good. You can stay right there. So, all right. So what I'm going to have you do when I tell you is read the words horizontally as fast as you can. Ready? Go.
Blue, red, yellow, orange, green, blue, purple, yellow, red, blue, orange, blue, yellow, red, green, orange, blue, purple, yellow, blue, orange.
Excellent. Okay. Now, I'm going to do this again. Don't start till I tell you. Now, I want you to say the color and not the word, and go across the same way. Ready?
Green, purple, is that orange? Red, yellow, red, blue, green, yellow, red, green, yellow, purple. I don't think that got purple. Orange, yellow, purple, yellow, green.
Okay. So I'm going to take a couple seconds off because you chit-chatted in there, but still, that was 3 times the amount of time it took you. And you were faster than most I've ever done on this. And most people will say, like, yellow, I mean purple, I mean green, or, you know. So you were pretty good, but still 3 times the amount of time it took for you to read the first one. And that's just an example to show you that we learn how to read words, not colors. But we can change our brains to do it differently, but it takes time. And so we need to let these offenders' brains heal, and we need to help them learn how to change their thinking in order to get them to stop committing crimes while they're in the community. So that is my spiel on drug court.
Thank you.
Yes.
And Carrie Conway.
Hi. Good evening. So you've heard tonight a little bit about intervention. And so in Stratford County and in New Hampshire, I would say as a whole, we're really good at intervention. I'm going to talk a little bit about prevention because I feel like that's often the missed spoke in the wheel. So a brief history of Stratford County programming. In 2002, our chairman of the Board of County Commissioners went to the delegation and asked them, because of jail overcrowding, I need $15 million to build a new jail. They said no. He later came back a few weeks later and said, I need $25 million. So it's $10 million that he originally asked for. And he said, included in that, I want to build an infrastructure of programming on the outside. They said, okay. So they were able to see that philosophical shift in what needed to change. So through our programming at Community Corrections, we've diverted 370 people a month into the community supervising them. So we, on a day-to-day basis, supervise 370 people in the community that would otherwise be incarcerated in our facility. It costs about $81 a day to incarcerate one inmate in our jail. It costs $9.18 a day to run our programming in the community. So if it doesn't make sense philosophically, it certainly makes sense fiscally. And we definitely tailor those discussions if we're speaking to a Democrat or Republican. Okay, so America's 3 largest psychiatric facilities are in jails. I want to repeat that. America's 3 largest psychiatric facilities are in jails. Cook County Jail in Chicago is the largest mental health provider in this country. Upwards of 2/3 of the people that come in and out of those doors struggle with some form of mental health related issue. The criminal justice system is at an intersection where law enforcement and first responders meet mental health and substance misuse. The criminal justice system is trying to respond to this epidemic whereby people who have experienced trauma, and that is a common thread in all of these programs, are ending up behind bars. For example, Susan, who has a trauma history, is on mental health medications to help cope with her symptoms. She stops taking the medications due to side effects, which is very common, and ends up having the police called because she's yelling in the streets. When an officer arrives, Susan, who because of her trauma history and current mental health state, is not cooperative. She resists arrest and therefore gets arrested and goes to jail. Generally speaking, the community feels more at ease knowing that someone's locked up behind bars. The long wait lists at New Hampshire state hospitals for involuntary emergency admissions are staggering. It is not humane to incarcerate and warehouse those individuals because there's not a bed available at a mental health facility. Incarceration causes re-traumatization, handcuffs, loss of freedoms, unequal power dynamics, potential lack of access to proper mental health medications, and lack of evidence-based treatments. Addiction, as Chief Justice Netto said, is finally seen as a public health issue. Addiction is a disease of the brain. We now know substance misuse affects brain chemistry. Being exposed to traumatic events affects brain chemistry. Pervasive toxic stress compounded by social factors is one root of substance misuse. People misuse substances as a way to cope with trauma. 74% of incarcerated individuals in this country have a documented substance misuse or co-occurring mental health issue. ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experiences, is a research study conducted by the United States Health Maintenance Organization and the CDC, where they look at 10 measures of types of childhood trauma. This questionnaire consists of 10 questions that gives you a score at the end. And it has a tremendous impact for predicting future violence, victimization, perpetration, lifelong health, and opportunity. It is important for professionals within the criminal justice system and within our community to be educated in trauma-informed approaches. This not only benefits survivors, but gives staff a toolkit to do their jobs. It is also important for professionals to be trained in the language and recognize symptoms of trauma. Teachers, nurses, first responders, thus diverting people who would normally be incarcerated into proper treatment regimes. Solutions. So when speaking with some of the clients that we work with, they were able to identify some of the strategies that would have been helpful to them growing up before entering the criminal justice system. Increase in-home whole family interventions. We have clients come into our office, and I think we all can maybe have similar experiences. People come into our police departments, our courtrooms, and they paint one picture, right? They say, oh, life is great. There's nothing wrong, everything is fine. Well, when we go and do home visits, it is a totally different picture. We get to see a person's living environment and meet family members to get a picture of the support systems in place, or should I say lack of support systems. This also allows us to intervene earlier during a traumatic event to decrease the chances of further negative impact on the family. We see generational cycles of crime. I have worked for Stratford County for 18 years. I've seen grandparents, parents, and children all wrapped up in the system. Increase after-school programs for school-age children. I grew up in Farmington. We had a community center. Saved my life. Community centers, girls and boys clubs. My two brothers and I grew up in a household where we witnessed and were exposed to domestic violence almost daily. Our saving graces were our teachers, our coaches, and our friends' families, and after-school programs that gave us a new normal. Our community centers were open every day, after school, and on weekends. The community was committed to funding these programs, maybe not because it was the right thing to do, even though of course it is, but because fiscally it made sense keeping kids off the street. Less foot patrol from the police, allowing officers to respond to more crisis-related calls. Community centers provide the community a sense of just that. However, they're often the first programs to be cut from budgets. Increase community food programs for food insecure areas. Also very traumatic when you grow up not having food. This would not only provide prevention against the trauma related to being hungry, but would also intervene in a child's life who is already experiencing food insecurity. When people do not have their basic needs met, it's traumatic. In Stratford County, we have created trauma-informed courts, our drug court, our mental health court, to address mental health and substance misuse as a way of diverting people. A crisis intervention team, we collaborated with Rochester Police, specifically trained police officers who are taught to identify mental health symptoms and respond with specialized training. Programs like this act as diversion programs. We keep trauma in the forefront of all things we do in Stratford County. Finally, I would say, in my experience, I've seen a lot of programs designed at intervention and not enough in prevention. We are good with coming up with solutions to identified issues, but we lack at putting money at preventing the issue in the first place. I am, however, encouraged that trauma is at the forefront of many conversations these days, and once we talk openly about something, we destigmatize it and the real work can begin.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to start with a couple of questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. We'll pass the mic around, so think about what questions you might like to ask. So this series is called What is a Criminal? So we're interested in this kind of very general, very philosophical question. And in listening to you speak, Justice Nadeau said something like 80% of the people in jails and prisons are there because of drug use or mental health issues, and there's maybe 20% who are the dangerous criminals that maybe that's appropriate response to. So I'm wondering from each of you, how would you answer this question of what is a criminal, and should that shift in our justice system?
We kind of have a funny saying that we deal with 10% of the people in town 90% of the time, which is kind of similar. You know, what is a criminal? It can be anything. It can be somebody that's just down on their luck and sees an opportunity. It can be a son stealing money out of his mother's purse because he needs a fix. You know, and it in some cases, and like I say, about 4 years ago, we didn't have a place to turn for that. And unfortunately, it took a lot of that work to be able to get places for people to turn so that they are working through these problems and not taking the money out of their mother's purse or father's wallet or breaking into a neighbor's house. You know, I'm proud to say that the rec department in Farmington is still going. It does help a lot of kids. We lost our DARE program for a while. It's now back in Farmington, and I think it's a program, it's good to have, you know, a DARE program or a similar program in the schools to try and start the process early in fifth grade, which is where we've aimed for, and just trying to get that talk out there, but also to let people know that the options are out there for help, and if they need it, please approach us. It's, you know, I'd much rather, you know, make a phone call to a recovery service for somebody than have to Narcan them the next night on the floor, or they don't make it. And I can say that those statistics have helped. Like I say, in 2015, we had 12 overdose deaths and a lot of overdoses. In 16, we dropped it to 4. That's still 4 deaths too many. In 17, we dropped it to 2, and 18 and 19, we were back up to 4 again. So we've definitely improved. There is still more room for improvement. You know, and one of the tragedies, you know, that I recall was a poor gentleman that had gotten sober and had gone to jail and had done well, and then was released from jail, and unfortunately tried it again. And in the time frame where he had gone from being sober to his jail stint and then getting out was about 10 months. In that time frame, the potency of heroin went up, I don't know how many times. And unfortunately, he took the same dose that got him high 10 months earlier. It killed him this time. And you see that occasionally. And, you know, if there was something out there that he could have reached out to, you know, afterwards might have helped. But you know, we've made a lot of improvements I think in trying to prevent it and in trying to work with people. But we still have, unfortunately, a long ways to go.
And I would say, I think maybe the question isn't what makes a criminal or who is a criminal, but what is the profile of a person who commits a crime, and why are they committing a crime? And there are several categories of those folks, and as I said, you know, many of them that we see, and we see it over and over again, are people who have suffered from very severe sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse. That's the population we're seeing, and their brains are taking that all in. They are developed in a way that is not what we all understand is the right development. And once in a while you hear someone say, well, I know somebody who had suffered from sexual abuse or physical abuse, and they don't go out and commit crimes. And that's anecdotal. Anecdotal is great, but it's the study of one. And it really is the outlier when you see those kinds of cases. What we see time and time again is brain damage as a result of trauma that then results in use of substances, that then results in mental health issues, that then results in committing crime. So that is the vast majority of the people that we see. So we need to think about it differently. It's not a matter of willpower often. I mean, certainly, as I've said, there's a category of folks where it is. But if we are trying to look at the person in front of us with the same sort of concept of self that we have of ourselves, we're not going to get them motivated to change. Certainly when it comes to substance use disorder, we need to address it chemically. I mean, let me give you two quick examples. There were one offender that we had in drug court said to us that when he was 5 years old, his dad would drive him around while the dad cut drug deals. So this 5-year-old is watching his dad sell drugs. That's what he did. What are we doing with our kids when they're 5-year-old? We're going to kindergarten parties. We're going to Halloween parties. We're teaching them how to tie their shoes, So that is a completely different world. And without empathy, without the ability to see that our way of living, it does not fix what they've been through, we're really going to be in a tough place. And then the second example I'll give you when it comes to substance use disorder is, especially with opioids, as I said, the brain is changed, and so you need to chemically deal with the brain. And one of the things we use is medication to assist treatment. So that's methadone, buprenorphine, Suboxone, Vivitrol. Those are all medications. Some of them are opioids, and they work. So there's a stigma around using that medication. And let me just give you an example of a study that was done in Sweden. They took 80 folks who were suffering from substance use disorder, and mainly heroin. That was all voluntary, so they were highly motivated to join the study. And everybody got all the bells and whistles of the treatment that we provide now in drug court. The individual therapy, the group counseling, the random drug testing, the support, recovery support networks, the skills building, all of that. Everybody got all that. Half of them got a placebo, and the other half got Suboxone. And it was a year-long study. In the first 6 months, they had to actually go to a hospital every single day, so they really were highly motivated. And at the end of the year, of the folks who got Suboxone, close to 90% were still engaged in treatment, which is really high for even people who don't have substance use disorder. None of them had used illicit drugs. I'm sorry, it was 40, so they did 20 and 20. So none of them had used illicit drugs. They were all still working and engaged in whatever they had to do. Of the 20 that had gotten the placebo, all of them had dropped out of treatment after 3 months, and 4 were dead of an overdose. So it's a medical malpractice if you're not using medical assisted treatment for opioid use disorder. So those kinds of things we need to really talk about and get people thinking differently about what is a criminal, what is a crime, and what motivates it.
So I think the word evokes fear in a lot of people.
that's
I
right.
think it's a label. I think there's a small percentage of the population who are truly sociopaths and psychopaths that maybe cannot be rehabilitated. And, I've been there 18 years. I think I've met 3 people that I feel like probably shouldn't be in society. We had a client, sort of what you were talking about. We had a client, Stephen, who from the age of 4 to 15 was sexually assaulted by his father, who was a law enforcement official locally. The father would come home with his law enforcement friends, take the child to the attic, and sexually assault him from age 5 to 14. Stephen has obsessive compulsive disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder. When he was with us, he was drinking bleach to try to clean his insides because he felt dirty. He was arrested and put on with us for second-degree assault. That person could be labeled a criminal, but if you peel back the layers of that word, there's more to what that means. That's someone's son, that's a survivor, that's a victim, that's all of other things. So I think I think criminal is a loaded word. It grabs someone's attention, but I think if you peel it back, there's so much more to that.
So I have one more question. All of you have been working in New Hampshire for many years, and mostly in this sort of Stratford County area, I think. I'm curious about Chief Drury. You said something about before the last 4 years or so, it was a very different scene. So what are you seeing in New Hampshire as a state in terms of moving toward a more trauma-informed perspective, in terms of more moving toward motivation rather than punishment? Is this something, is this where we're going now? Is there pushback to that? I'm curious about all of your perspectives on that.
I think our perception has changed. I think once we realize that these are people's children that are struggling, I think the door opens to get them help. And 15 years ago, the drug scene wasn't any. I suppose it's all relative in the pendulum, but it sure wasn't the same back then. My worst thing when I was a patrol officer 20 years ago was a domestic situation or a bar fight. Now we are social workers. We're responding. My officers are trained in Narcan. We're certified in CPR and defibrillators, and to be a police officer is not just being a cop anymore. You used to go out there and you'd have your billy club, and it's a lot different. Respect, I think, was given back then. Now we earn it, and we have to earn it every day. We have to earn your respect by doing the right things. And I think the right thing is not to lock people up like we did 20 years ago, and to try and get them the help that we need. Just, at $80 a day versus $9 a day is a little different in my pocket. And, in trying to work with the community, just looking at things, the community outreach that we do now that was not done 20 years ago, we're trying to be more approachable, and also, we live in your community too. So, the neighbor that overdoses, that's your neighbor, might be my neighbor too. So I think it is important to try and change that perception, to work with people. My officers all wear body cameras now, and you go, well, yeah, but the body camera is an independent reference that shows what happened. And not to get off topic here, but I don't have any officer complaints anymore. I have somebody come in and say, that officer assaulted me, and let me pull up the body camera footage, and no, I didn't want to file a report or a complaint or anything. I just wanted to let you know he was a little rough with me, and the body camera, not only it protects our officers, but it protects the society in showing the good that we do. One of the things, we had a great rescue, but unfortunately due to statute, I can't show you the body camera footage. But it's out there to not only to help us, but to protect you as well, and to protect the officers. But it's also, it's something that shows our transparency, that we want to, here's the good things that we do. I've had officers buy somebody a pair of socks because they didn't have socks. We had a lady go into our Rite Aid one time and shoplift lice medication. And we said, why did you shoplift lice medication? My daughter has lice and she can't go to school. And immediately we just paid for the medication and we took care of that. And he said, if you have a problem, come see us. The community is open to helping people. I would never want my child to suffer from lice or have to shoplift like that. And things like that that have some legitimacy, I guess, and humanize the struggles that these poor people are going through. And I probably have gotten off topic on your question quite a bit, but I like to talk, so.
Sounds like things are going that way in Farmington.
Yeah.
I think that I can tell you that I started on the bench 23 years ago, and I didn't imagine I'd be sitting next to a chief of police who would talk about the need to divert people into a mental health system instead of arresting them. So that's progress in my view, and you see that more and more across the state. And I think the other thing that's important is for those of us to go out in the community and talk to all of you and have this conversation, because we can't get complacent. I mean, there's a statistics from about 5 years ago where a state that collected about $100, of that $100 for drug law enforcement or whatever, it's $100 for drugs, $10 of it would go to treatment and prevention. New Hampshire, it was 22 cents. And so it's really, discouraging to see those kinds of statistics. I think it's getting better. I think the unfortunate effect of the opioid epidemic was to put all that more on the table. But the other thing we have to pay attention to is, back in the 60s, we had this well-intended idea of deinstitutionalizing the mental health system, which was really awful and not supportive. And the idea was to create these community mental health systems and fund them. And then JFK was killed, and that legislation didn't pass, so they weren't really fully funded. So now people who are no longer in those institutions where they shouldn't have been are now in the jails instead of community mental health. So we need fully funded community mental health programs. We need to pay the people that work there a living wage so that they can deal with the hardest, challenging cases. And that's never going to go away. And it's really hard to talk about policy-wise, investing money now to save money later. It's like saying, if the problem's right in front of you, it's hard to imagine. And one of the statistics I didn't tell you was, if you leave prison, you recidivate at a rate of about 70%, but if you graduate from drug court, it's more like 25 or 30%. So drug court costs $12,000 a year, prison costs $80,000 a year. So those things we need to keep on the forefront if we're going to make progress.
So a shift that I think I've seen in the time that I've been here is that people are using their voice to elect and educate officials who have the same philosophical thinking that we do. So it's important to vote, and it's important to reach out to your legislatures, to follow best practice trends. There's sort of a wave across the country that comes, to be fiscally conservative, but also to follow evidence-based practices to make sure you're getting your biggest bang for your biggest buck. And so all of that, I think, we've done a good job educating our delegation in Stratford County. We have a collaboration with our police chiefs, so to just sort of all work in partnership, and I think that's what's made things more successful.
If I could just add to, when I went to my first chiefs of police meeting, it was chiefs of police, and that was it. Now we work with corrections, and we have a monthly meeting in Stratford County as well as a monthly meeting in the state level, and to see those people come together as well, not only as with drug court, but with LEAD program. The LEAD program, to get it started, was defense attorneys and prosecutors, and our county attorney, Tom Velarde, was part of it. The USAG's office, and all of these people that had a little piece of the pie to play to make this program work. And I'm sure it was very similar with as how drug court started, was getting some people that had some buy-in to it. To give it a shot, and drug court is excellent. I've attended several graduations, and it is amazing what they have to do to graduate.
Right.
Let's take some questions. Would you wait for the mic, please? Just we're recording.
So what is the status of programming with the incarcerated people in New Hampshire? Are they required to participate in any cognitive behavioral therapy, moral recognition therapy, or is there plans to get that implemented?
That's a really good question. And we use cognitive behavioral therapy and MRT in drug court, and they are the most effective tools to change behavior. I think that each of the jails in all the counties are funded and at a county level, so each county is different. Stratford County is one of the more progressive counties, so you can answer that question. But the prison is also attempting to use those techniques as well. And one thing, this gives me a chance to say, sometimes people will say to me, why not give people treatment behind the walls? Then you can treat them and lock them up. And the studies actually show that treatment behind the walls without long-term aftercare, like a year or two, is like giving them no treatment at all. And it really is the most expensive, least effective way of giving somebody treatment. Because when you're in jail, you don't have to deal with your life circumstances. So you can't practice those tools that you're using out in the community. Like your old friend comes knocking on your door to try to sell you drugs, or you're dealing with a divorce in your family and you relapse. You don't have to deal with that while you're in jail or prison. But there is definitely a place for those programs. Like in Stratford County, that they have a great jail program and it works well with drug court. So we've got somebody in drug court who should be treated in the community, and they're continuing to abscond and they're continuing to engage in this behavior. We can't get our hooks into them. We say, all right, you're gonna go do the jail program first, and then you're gonna be released into drug court. So that's the automatic aftercare in the community. So there are ways for collaboration, but it's not a silver bullet to say, let's just lock people up and treat them there, because it doesn't always work.
I have a question. Thank goodness for people like you. Holy cow, that you want to do this work and you keep at it for 20 more years. I was lucky to be invited to Dover Police Station, and they have a very good program with young people, high school students. I don't know if it's called restorative justice, but I think it has a name, and you would know about it, Officer Drury, I think. But what they did was, say there's property damage and a high school senior has damaged something badly, and the police are called and he gets caught. And what the Dover Police Department does is they have the student come in front of a group of people who are in the community, business people and just folks. And there's about 5 of them, plus the police department, and plus a youth worker. And the parent comes in, or the guardian comes in, and it was very, very interesting to see this. The kids are terrified usually. And I despaired a little bit because I could see some of these parents weren't stellar parents.
Right.
So it helps them too. And it seems like so many people in prison, but we've got to get to the younger ones to see.
The parenting, yes.
And some kind of education. I mean, somehow we got kids to stop smoking cigarettes with big ads that went out. But it is, I just despair unless we can get to the young people. And I wonder if you could tell maybe the audience about this program, because you probably know about it in Dover.
We have a similar program in the county for juvenile diversion. And it meets, I believe it meets in Barrington and also meets in Farmington at our building. And a similar situation where a child gets into a little bit of trouble, they're brought before a body of their elders, let's say, and they work out how they're going to get over this hump this bump in the road to get them back on the right path. And our juvenile diversion program, I think, has worked pretty well. I'm fortunate that my prosecutor is also my juvenile prosecutor, but he's also my adult prosecutor. And he does violation levels and misdemeanor levels prosecution. But he can kind of follow them along, and he's been with our agency for a very long time. So, as he sees the people mature, I think he's able to kind of guide them in the right direction. Yeah, we do have a juvenile diversion program in Stratford County that I think has been quite successful, so.
Hi. So I'm a psychology and justice studies major, and in psychology, we learn what you guys were mentioning about with trauma and stuff like that. Do any of you have, someone mentioned CBT and all that, but that's great. Have any of you heard about or implement EMDR or those kind of programs?
Yes, we do have some treatment providers in our drug courts that use EMDR, and the key is to have an assessment done of each person, because not every modality works for everybody. So if you get an assessment done, and the assessment's performed by a qualified treatment provider, they can come up with what might work for someone, DBT, CBT, MRT, and all of those. And so we do have those in our drug courts, yeah. And I don't know if they're elsewhere, but definitely the treatment providers use those
Right,
techniques,
yeah, I mean, Southeastern New Hampshire Services, who's
Right.
our drug court treatment provider, they use it to their general population. And also, in Stratford County, for everyone that's booked into our facility, you know, our goal is to, like, there's no one-size-fits-all. So we do an assessment on everyone that comes in to see, it's sort of my job, to make sure no one falls through the cracks, to see if someone a first-time offender, are they high-risk, high-need. You know, we have a program called the Employability Program, which I'm really excited about. It's the only program in the state. In 2008, we partnered with DHHS, and we recognized that there were a lot of people ending up incarcerated who weren't paying child support. And we thought, if they're in jail, they're definitely not going to be paying child support, so this doesn't make any sense. So collaborated with our judges, and now the folks who aren't paying child support get ordered to our program. And since 2008, we've collected over $700,000 through case management that goes directly to the families. So I'm hoping that more counties really take a look at that. But yeah, that's something we're really proud of.
One more question. So, shoot, I just lost it. For justice court, I guess specifically, do you guys like follow up with those who graduate, and like how successful
That's a great question.
are they?
Yes, and so we do, for most of them, you aim to complete drug court in 18 to 24 months. Some people take longer, some people take shorter, and they're still on probation for a couple of years after they complete, and they come back to court sort of quarterly so we can check up on them. They also leave with an aftercare plan, and hopefully they've built up a sober social support network, and they're engaged in sort of a recovery community so that they have that constant contact. We are now looking at doing recidivism studies for the whole state. Stratford County has did one a long time ago. And what you try to do is follow up 3 years after. If you follow up a year after, you're probably going to get a rosier picture than you might if you wait 3 years, and to see what is their level of reoffending at 3 years. So when Stratford County did that 10 years ago, it was a 3-year look forward. They found their recidivism rate of their graduates was around 25%, which, as I said, is a lot lower than when you leave jail or prison. And even those who fail out of drug court, because there are some that do, because they're such difficult cases, they still only recidivate at a rate of about 40% because they've gotten something out of drug court compared to somebody who leaves jail or prison. And, you know, people will ask me, what's your graduation rate? So because if you have a 100% graduation rate, you're a great drug court. I'm like, no, you're a bad drug court if you have a 100% graduation rate. That means you're targeting the wrong population. If you pick somebody who can put one foot in front of the other and get through the program easily, that's not the person that needs drug court. They need diversion, or they need probation, and then just check in with you once every 6 months. So if you have like about a 50 or 60% graduation rate, that's the sweet spot, because we are dealing with such a difficult population.
Hi. I'm wondering what allows someone to be applicable or to be able to apply for drug court. Like, could it be any type of crime or only nonviolent drug offenses? And then also who advocates for them to go there? Is it their lawyer, the prosecutor, or the judge?
Great, that's a great question. Really, it's anybody. It's not dependent on the charge. It's dependent on whether or not they qualify as being high risk and high need. So there are some drug courts that say, look, if it's murder, rape, first degree assault, they're not going to be we don't want to endanger the community. So they're not going to be in drug court. But violent, if sometimes someone commits a robbery and they push the clerk out of the way, they're still going to be eligible for drug court. And so it's not just possession of drugs. It is burglary, it's theft, it's robbery, anything where they are committing crimes over and over again and they have a substance use disorder. Now, the big question is, what about sales? What about somebody who sells or is a drug court entrepreneur? If somebody really doesn't have a substance use disorder and they are selling for profit, they're not going to be in drug court. Sometimes they try to sort of like, yes, I have a substance use disorder. That's why we do an assessment of them first. And generally what happens is the person can be referred by anybody, but usually the first person that has eyes on them to make that guess is the defense attorney. Sometimes it's law enforcement before, they're even arrested. And if they're educated in drug court, they can say, how about drug court? So then the defense attorney will bring this person, say this person should be in drug court, and they will talk with the prosecutor. Then the defendant will fill out an application, and then that team I talked about will decide should this person be assessed for drug court. And then it should be objective, not like a gut feeling, like, oh, this person's from the Smith family and the whole family's been in the system, they'll never do well. It's are they high need, are they high risk, they should be in drug court.
We've had some good success recommending people. And going, oh, we just arrested so-and-so.
That's great.
And they had
Best way to
whatever
do
they had on them. And then we let the prosecutor know at the county level, hey, we just arrested him, the paperwork's coming through the pipeline, I think this would be a good person for drug court.
great.
And it does seem to make a difference.
You're better than that than most
Well,
police departments. That's really good.
We have a county attorney, I will say, in Stratford
He's
County that is awesome, very open. And the two-way street, you've got to have a two-way street that flows in this. So, and I think you have a question in the back.
Excuse me. I was wondering if either of the justices were aware of the Smart Recovery Program or their Inside Out program, which is designed specifically for prisoners.
I'm not aware of the Inside Out program, are you? No. But Smart Recovery that's like an alternative to AA, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's an alternative or an adjunct. People
Yes.
can do both.
Yep.
It's an REBT program based on like the stages of change model.
Right.
It's a secular option, yeah.
Yeah, so AA, SOS, Smart Recovery, we do use those in drug court. And generally, the studies show that you can't really force someone into those programs. They are excellent support systems and create that safety net for after drug court. They are not the evidence-based treatment models that we need to use for somebody, but they definitely supplement it. And what we do with our folks in drug court is we say, in phase one, when you are completely unstable, if you're not already engaged in that kind of network, it's not a good time for you to start. Let's wait till you're in phase two when you're stabilized and you can understand what it is and what it has to offer, and then get you engaged in it there. But you're right, it's a great ancillary to what we're doing.
Do you mean the ones that you can't recommend or force are religious-based programming or you just can't force
Just
any
in general,
programming?
because of what the program offers, they just need to be ready. They need to be stabilized in intense treatment and then start using those recovery support systems to supplement it. Because their brains are so overloaded, if you it's like we don't want them to be looking for a job in phase one either, because their brains aren't ready for that. So that's kind of what the training is and the evidence-based practices are.
All right, because I do have a study. If you're interested, I can give
Yeah.
you my business card after
That'd
about
be great.
a study that was done in New South Wales, Australia.
Great.
So you were talking about phase one of the program and how there's unreliable housing with a lot of these people. So where exactly are they living during the first part if they don't really have a job or don't know where they can live?
Right. That is the biggest challenge for drug court is housing and transportation. And every county's different. Stratford County luckily is more fortunate, but some people are homeless, and we don't exclude them from drug court just because they're homeless. We do have some sober living opportunities. There are some shelters. There's some temporary hotel rooms. There are couch surfing. There's families. It's really a hodgepodge, and that is like, I think, the next frontier for our state is stable housing. And my dream is we have a lot of sober living. We need using living. Because if somebody is in active use, but they are engaged fully in treatment, they can't stay abstinent in the first, 6 months. Or if they have a slip, we don't want them kicked out because then they're worse off. So I wish we had communities where you could have, stages of living. This is using living, this is in between living, this is sober living. Because you also don't want people using around others who are staying sober because they're gonna bring them down. So that's a big area that's super challenging. Right now, there is some grant funding at the statewide level for housing opportunities for people coming out of prison and people who are in drug court. And that, it's in the early stages of development, and we're hoping we can use some of that. But that is the big challenge. Really good point, and such a struggle. And we can see it. As soon as somebody gets stable housing, they start doing way better. And as soon as they lose that housing, they relapse. And it's just classic.
So this might be like a dumb question. I'm not meaning to like devalue the life of anybody, but do you guys ever think that like if it's the 10th or the 11th or like the 12th time that you're using Narcan on somebody, like when does it become a waste of resources to try to like revive that person again just for them to relapse?
I apologize, I'm not coming up with the term for it.
Compassion fatigue?
Thank you. Compassion fatigue. After that many times of seeing somebody like that, it does wear on you. You know, we get frustrated. And that's when I've got to remember that it's somebody's child that's on the ground there, or, you know, or somebody's relative or somebody's father or something like that. And I've got to go, and this is, sometimes I get in their face. You know, we've just hit them with Narcan, they're coming out of it, and I'll give them I'll leave a recovery card on their chest. I will spread them around their apartment, you know, so they'll see them, and maybe it'll get them to at least start to think about it. You know, and sometimes we have that talk. You know, hey, you're gonna take a ride in an ambulance, but call me when you get back. And it's that outreach that you've gotta try and do, because, you know, like I say, it's sad, when you're there for that many times. And I have one now in town. He's been a thorn in my side since he was knee-high to a grasshopper, and we can't reach him. And he punched a cop in the face one time. And we probably Narcaned him 10 times. And I am gonna find him in a gutter someday. I know it. We can't seem to make that connection with this poor fellow.
And we can't save everybody. You know, we're just not gonna be able to save everybody. There are some studies that say actually the use of Narcan, even if it's over and over again, has reduced overdose deaths. So that's what I need to hear, because you're right, it gets very frustrating. And a lot of times it's the 5th, 6th time where they say, okay, I've had it too, I'm going to treatment. So that's what we hold out for.
Yeah, and the whole compassion fatigue, it's real.
It's real.
It's real in first responders, it's real in the jails and prisons, real in the court system. So that's where we step back and we put on our professional hats and say, we may feel this way, but we're sworn to do this job. And then we're, you know, making it more about our actions and less about the personal part of it, and it makes it a little bit more bearable. But there are times, you know, Joe Smith comes in for the 6th or 7th time, we're like, what are we going to do different that's gonna work this time? And maybe it's the 8th or 9th time that works.
Yeah, I also read a study that said it takes, for somebody high-risk, high-need, it takes 7 efforts at treatment for it to finally stick. That stunned me, you know, because you know, the olden days when I didn't know anything about drug court, I'd say, well, this person's been through a 28-day program, now it's time for jail. But 28 days, there's no magic to that. That's an insurance number, you know, it's not what it really takes to get somebody to be engaged in treatment, so.
So I was just wondering, once these individuals are at the point where they are able to look for a job and possibly hold down a job, is that something that you help them with in drug court, or are they kind of left to their own devices?
No, absolutely. In fact, a lot of drug courts require by the time of graduation that you have a job, or at least that you're doing some, if you're disabled and you can't work, then you're doing something in volunteer work or something like that. And they have case managers who meet with them regularly, who are working on how to get a bank account, how to get yourself to your doctor's appointment, how to make a doctor's appointment, how to, you know, you got to get your teeth dealt with and your depression dealt with at the same time, because if you're depressed, you're not going to engage in treatment, you know. So the case managers do a lot of that daily living and getting, helping them find jobs and get jobs and keep jobs. I had one graduate, I always try to ask it was a participant, I try to ask them, tell me something positive that's happened this week. And one guy said to me, I paid my income taxes. And I thought, who the heck thinks that's positive? But he thought it was positive because never before he had a real job where he never kept a job for more than a month. So he was actually able to file income taxes. So yes, the case managers do a lot of that work with them.
So going off of that, how do you expect them to keep a job if they have to go in constantly for the drug test? Do you work with
Oh, you
employers?
sound like some of the
I know,
participants.
exactly.
That's a good point. What we say to them is, if you're not in drug court, you're in prison. So do you want to be in prison or do you want to be in drug court? And then we also say, your drug court obligations are job number one. And that's hard because a lot of them don't have a lot of financial stability. I mean, if there are people who have a job in phase one and they can do both, and the other thing that I think is changing is the business community is understanding recovery. And they are way more supportive than I ever saw back 20 years ago. The employers understand drug court. Sometimes employers come to court sessions to show their support. So it is hard because the participants will say, I have this job, but I have to go to treatment. What the heck? And we say, well, if you're not in treatment, you're going to be in prison. So you got to find a way to make it work. So that's one of the case management challenges too. Did you have something else to add to that at all?
No, I was just gonna say, sometimes we don't often like it, but people will get third shift jobs, and that's a whole
Yeah.
other beast that we try to deal with.
As long as they can stay awake, yeah.
I don't know if I need it, sir. I think
Oh, no, you don't.
For recording. All right. All right, well, Your Honor, thank you. I found your oration about the need for sympathy, for these individuals compelling. But going off of the lady's comment about resources, it is just that. These programs in Narcan, this isn't free. The taxpayer, we pay for that. Our parents are paying for this through their property tax. The fees we pay, whether it's hunting or fishing or anything else, our license, is all going to pay for these programs. And more of our EMS calls are for these people with overdoses.
Right.
And at this time, I mean, how do they pay that back to us? The person who calls 911 because their house is on fire, or someone who's breaking in, doesn't ask for that. But for those of us who have dealt with this enough, and it's hard to have sympathy when we have family members over and over again. At least from my point of view, they chose this. No one put that needle in their arm. No one made them smoke, the meth. And the fact that, our EMS calls, it seems like to me, like that we have to spend resources on these individuals who chose this and not some emergency that they didn't ask for. I mean, do we, someone who a drunk driver who maybe takes out a telephone pole, the state will charge them for that. Or the arsonist, they'll get sued or they'll get charged for that building. I mean, shouldn't we be, currently, I mean, are we charging people for the Narcan or for these EMS calls where it's like, you're doing this to yourself. This isn't a random event. And if not, I mean, do you think it'd only be fair to the taxpayer that either they do have to pay back for the resources that they're using for a choice that they made, or maybe that they have to do community service and give back to us?
Right. So let me answer that in two ways, because I think you're talking about the drug court person and then you're talking about the EMS piece. And the drug court person, you're going to pay for. If we don't have drug court, you're going to pay for them to go to prison, which is $80,000 a year. If they're in drug court, you're going to pay for them for $12,000 a year. So either way, you're going to pay for it as a taxpayer, because that's what we do as a society. We have a prison, we fund our Department of Corrections, and a person who goes to prison, it costs $80,000 a year. So if they're in drug court and it costs a lot less and they commit a lot less crime, that's actually an investment. You're getting a better return on your investment. Because when we're talking about drug court, these are felons that we are going to have to see. The other extreme of it I get sometimes is from the health community who says, why are they even in your court system? Why aren't they just in treatment? And I say, because they've also committed crimes. So we've got to deal with the felony that we have in front of us. And we can deal with it by spending $80,000 for a 2 to 4 year sentence. They come out and they're just as bad as they were before. Or we can spend, $12,000 a year and they graduate and they have a paying job and they're giving back to the community. And I think on the EMS side, you can answer that better. But I also think that you're going to get a better return on your investment when you have somebody who, actually doesn't die and can get treatment and can get saved, basically. And then the last piece I would say about that is when we are looking at what is the best way to use our resources to improve public safety, then we need to be looking at these kinds of programs to keep our public safe. And community service is a great idea. We have community service requirements in drug court. And actually, sometimes I will say to drug court teams, look, If you have your team going to do a community service day, they go paint the fences on a huge park, put up a sign and say, this park was cleaned up by your drug court team, your local drug court team. But because, yeah, there ought to be some give back to that and give back to the community, because we are here really to take care of the people who are struggling. And, I guess the last thing I would say about choice, people choose to smoke, and we don't close the hospital doors when they get cancer. We don't say, go away.
That's fair.
Yeah.
It's tough when, 60,000 people are dying a year because of overdoses. If we could, the amount of money that they would be paying in taxes just in fueling their car and paying their income taxes, and $60,000 times that number is probably in the billions. So I believe anyway, I won't swear to this, Your Honor, but I believe our EMS does charge for overdose runs. Now, they probably don't get paid for them many times. I'm sure they're probably, those are bills that are probably going not paid. But to the best of my knowledge, there is at least being a bill generated for that. I sat on the Narcan Commission in Concord about 3 years ago to keep the flow of Narcan coming to the state. We had a lot of uphill battles. We were able to get the price. It floats around $40 a kit, and I believe I think there's still 2 doses in a kit now. So it is an expense at $40 every time it happens, and it's happening hundreds of times a day, or at least probably 100 times a day in the state. So it is, I won't kid you, it is frustrating to see. I've got to remember to try and look long-term.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think maybe just maybe 2 more questions, and then we'll just have some time for casual conversation and snacks.
I just kind of had more of a comment than a question, just kind of going off of what was previously said. I know in our class with Donna Perkins, we kind of talk about a lot of these people. I mean, it's really easy to say from the outside that it's a choice that these people make. But we discussed quite a bit that a lot of them do experience, like you were saying, childhood trauma and, lots of horrific things that happen to them. And a lot of this substance abuse can either come from predisposition or coping mechanisms, just to try to deal with everything that they've gone through. So I think that's also just kind of important to kind of keep in the back of your mind that from the outside, it's really easy to say, yes, this is your choice. But, when you kind of peel back everything and kind of look at it from a deeper level, it's these people have been through something pretty horrific. And this is just, it's not the best coping mechanism, but also it's probably the only thing that they do know.
Right. Good point.
So you had said that in order to apply for the court, they had to be in your court multiple times for whatever reason. Do you think there's a program that could be implemented after you've seen them 2 or 3 times to try to prevent them from going down that rabbit hole? Or
Everybody always asks that. So just to be clear, drug court targets one population. It's the high-risk, high-need. So they're already high-risk, high-need. If somebody's low risk, and that means they're not likely to reoffend, but they're high need, there's a different program, different way to treat them, and that is they should be just on probation and they should go get treatment. They have an order for treatment and they'll do it. If they're a high risk, low need, then they can be on intensive probation where they get sanctioned every time they use because they can stop using on their own. They're not as high need. So there are different quadrants basically, and depending on where the person is in a quadrant, that's how you decide what level of supervision and treatment they get.
that makes sense. Thank you.
So at this point, we have a little more time and we have some food. So we'd like to invite you to have some snacks, to talk with our panelists and with each other. I also want to point out, I saw somebody taking pictures earlier. So I want to mention that if you go to whatisacriminal.org, we have all the videos from the series. This video should be up in about a week if you want to refer to it in the future. And again, please come back on April 7th for our final lecture, or panel rather, on reintegration. Thank you so much.